Good morning. Welcome to the March 27th, 2025 Social Equity Working Group meeting.
Bienvenidos
As
a
the
la
chair, I'm
Junta
calling
de
today's
Equidad.
meeting to order
Yo
at
estoy
9:30
Son las
a.m.
9:30
I would now like
minutos.
to ask
Me
today's
gustaría
interpreter to
pedirles a
introduce
los
themselves and
intérpretes
walk through
que
how to access
nos
our
den
interpretation
su
services for today's
interpretación de
meeting.
los servicios. Good morning. Announcement from the interpreter. To use the interpretation feature, please scroll to the bottom of the Zoom screen where the meeting scrolls are. Click on the interpretation icon, the world, and select English as your language. If you are joining through Zoom, mobile app, cell phone, tablet, etc., please press the ellipsis, the three dots, then interpretation, and then choose your language. Finally, click on mute original audio to not hear the original Spanish in the background. Headsets are available for interpretation. If you are in the meeting room, please check out a headset from the receptionist in the lobby. Buenos días, aviso por parte de la intérprete. Para hacer el uso de interpretación, favor de desplazarse a la parte inferior de la pantalla de Zoom, donde aparecen los controles. Haga clic en el icono de interpretación, globo terráqueo, y seleccione Spanish, español, si está utilizando la aplicación móvil de Zoom, celular, tableta, etc., presione los puntos suspensivos, 3 puntos, luego interpretación, y luego el idioma. Si no desea escuchar el audio original en inglés en el fondo, por favor seleccione Mute Original Audio. Silenciar audio original. Contamos con auriculares para el servicio de interpretación. Si se encuentra en la sala de la reunión, favor de pedir los auriculares con la recepcionista en el vestíbulo. Gracias.
Thank you. And I am pleased to act as the new chair for the Social Equity Working Group. My name is Allison Snow. I am the mayor of Lemon Grove, a historically disinvested community, and so I am really excited to be part of this. I also, as by way of background, during the subprime mortgage crisis, I used to be working at a big law firm and was doing securities litigation. I was going to represent one of the C-level executives at Countrywide. I thought I should be helping the people that were losing their homes and not this guy, so I jumped and left and ran the consumer production division over at Legal Aid Society of San Diego for 13 years. There in the trenches, I got to see firsthand how policies impact everyday lives and have really struggled to fight and make sure that we have policies that help working class families be able to make it in tough times. And now I currently run the University of San Diego's Housing Rights Legal Clinic. And so we're there to design to serve a population of people that are unable to receive services from Legal Aid Society of San Diego. So just trying to fill up all the niches and gaps in the access to justice. So I'm really excited to be part of this group. I will ask our clerk, Mr. Michael Garcia, to confirm that we have a quorum.
A quorum, Chair.
Okay. And can you give instruction on voting and commenting buttons for anyone new?
This particular meeting doesn't use any buttons or voting. It's just all hand raises.
Okay, perfect. We're going analog. Thank you so much. I would like to take a moment to acknowledge the land that we call home. The tribal nations of the San Diego region has historically faced injustices. We acknowledge the harmony that existed between the land, nature, and its original peoples, who have since endured displacement, persecution, and systemic oppression. We pay our respect to the unceded territory and homelands of the 18 tribal nations in our region, the most in any county in the United States, from the 4 cultural groups, the Kumeyaay, Dieguino, the Luiseño, the Cumpeño, and the Cahuilla. This land has nourished, healed, protected, and embraced them for many generations in a relationship of balance and harmony. As members of the SANDAG community, we acknowledge this legacy. We aspire to learn from this indigenous traditional knowledge and experiences in undoing the injustices of the past. I will now call the meeting to order. Please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Now I will review the meeting process for both the working group members as well as the members of the public who wish to participate. For working group members, when you would like to speak, please raise your hand and I will call you by name. In front of you are iPads where you will find today's agenda and supporting materials by clicking on the arrow on the top left. Please note that you can zoom in and out using the iPad touchscreen. Clerk, can you provide a quick reminder on how public comments will work?
Thank you, Chair. As noted on the cover page of today's meeting agenda, in addition to email comments that we receive, the public may also provide live comments during today's meeting. If you're a member of the public here in the room and would like to provide comments on an item, please submit a speaker slip to the clerk, and these slips are located on the table at the back of the room. If you're a member of the public joining on Zoom, please raise your virtual hand during the item you'd like to comment on. The raise hand button can be found on the Zoom toolbar for those who are joining via computer, or by entering *9 for those joining via telephone. The clerk will call on members of the public first, followed by virtual commenters. Commenters will be called by name or the last 3 digits of your telephone number for those joining via telephone. Back to you, Chair.
Thank you so much. Do any of the members of the working group have any questions about the process? Okay. Let's begin with item number 1. Item number 1 is, we'll start with public comment.
We have no public comment on this item, Chair.
Okay. Do any working members or working group members have comments or questions not on today's agenda? I would like to share a few updates. As most of you are aware, SANDAG is in the process of moving offices, and we have confirmed that our next social equity working group meeting will be held at the new SANDAG office building located at 1011 Union Street, and staff will follow with more information about the details and logistics after this meeting. A regional plan update is scheduled to go to the Board of Directors at the April 25th board meeting. The draft regional plan is expected to be released at the end of May for a 55-day public comment period. And finally, Bike Anywhere Day will take place Thursday, May 15th. A toolkit with promotional materials, including how to sign up and register for pit stops, is now available online and has been shared with colleagues throughout the CBO network meeting. Thank you to all of your organizations for helping us spread the word. We will now proceed to approving agenda item number 2, which are the February 27th Social Equity Working Group meeting minutes. Clerk, do we have any comments from the public on the minutes?
We have no public comment, Chair.
Okay. And do any of the working group members have comments or questions? Yes, Georgette.
I do. More a procedure. I wasn't present. I believe it was Goyo, or I don't know if it was Lisa. So would it be okay for me to abstain or vote for it, or what would be the recommendation? Okay, okay.
Any other comments or questions? All right. Do I have a motion to approve the meeting minutes? Okay. Do we have a second? Perfect. All in favor, say aye or raise your hand. Any opposed? No in opposition.
Right. That motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to the next item, we have item number 3. It's the coordinated plan update. And we will have the staff present the initial findings. To kick us off, we have Tim Garrett and Ruby Morales from SANDAG and they will present an update on the region's coordinated public transit human services transport plan. Welcome, Tim and Ruby. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you. Yeah, great to be here. Tim Garrett, Associate Regional Planner with SANDAG, joined here with Ruby Morales, also Associate Regional Planner. This is an update. We came to the Social Equity Working Group back in October of 2024 when we were in an earlier stage of the plan, so we're here to present some of the findings from our outreach. Quick background on what the coordinated plan is. It's a short range, so 4 to 5 year look ahead at how the region will provide transit and specialized transportation for the region and what the priorities for that should be. So looking at the unmet transportation needs of people with disabilities, older adults, and people with low incomes, and trying to fill those gaps with the resources that we have, and coordinating with other agencies that provide transportation within the region. So as we have talk about definitions with this, or as we talk about these results, just want to set some definitions. Transit is referring to fixed route transit, so that's buses, trolleys, coaster, train, etc. And specialized transportation is a bunch of different things. One of it is paratransit, so that's the complementary service provided for people with disabilities who can't ride fixed route transit. And then there's a lot of other services like door-to-door and shuttle services that are operated oftentimes by nonprofit community-based organizations. And it's a really important plan that we do because we have federal requirements and state requirements to fulfill, but it's also important so that we have access to continued federal funding through the Section 5310 program. Some of the requirements that we have to follow are laid out here, federal, state, and local, including SANDAG Board Policy 18, which specifies the requirements that SANDAG has in relation to the local public transit operators, MTS and NCTD. And we also work with FACT, which is our Coordinated Transportation Services Agency, which is the agency that's supposed to coordinate all of the transportation services, all of those specialized services throughout the region. And like I said, all of this is important for continuing to access funding for our specialized transportation grant program because that's the way that we provide funding. It's a competitive basis for providers in the region. So this plan helps us identify what the priorities for funding should be. And then grantees need to be responding to those needs in order to get funding. So we've been doing many forms of outreach over the last several months, trying to hear from folks across the region what the unmet transportation needs are and what could better help them meet their needs, help them get to the places that they need to go. So we've been doing focus groups, which included both transportation providers as well as transportation riders, people who would be using these services. We did a survey, which is a scientific survey from folks across the region for older adults and people with disabilities to hear about their transportation behaviors and needs. And Ruby's going to be talking more about the results of that today. And we've also been doing some presentations, many presentations and public hearings at different working groups so that we can hear from all of folks like you, other working groups, and we can bring that feedback to our transportation committee, who will ultimately providing a lot of the policy direction on what will be in the plan and how we implement it moving forward. So like I said, we have draft survey results. We're calling them draft still because we're still finalizing. We're pretty confident about the data, but we're just double checking to make sure that we have everything completely correct and that our interpretation of it is correct. So we want to share that here with you, some of these results. And if you want to know more, we encourage you to ask questions or give us feedback on, maybe we have a different interpretation than you do, and we really want to have these results be reflective of the folks across the region. So happy to share those with you here today. I'm going to turn it over to Ruby, who's going to walk us through those.
Thank you. So our survey was conducted in December of 2024 over a 1-month period. The survey it focused on transportation behaviors. And I note that the last coordinated plans have had a questionnaire that spoke to the different themes, needs, and challenges, but we wanted something that was more scientific, like Tim mentioned. We have this survey. It was available in English and Spanish. And it was also compatible with browser plugin for translations as well. And we received 1,544 responses from across the San Diego region. To be eligible for the survey, respondents had to be age 65 or older, or with a disability, or both. And this table shows the breakdown of participants with a disability, without a disability, over the age of 65 and under the age of 65. And participants were also asked to self-identify their disabilities, and mobility impairment was the most common type, along with hearing and vision impairment. Respondents were asked about trips they made in the last month and the mode by which those trips were made. This graph shows responses from older adults and people with disabilities, and older adults are in the blue and people with disabilities are in the purple, but I like to note that some fit into both categories as well. And we can see that personal vehicle was the mode most chosen, along with getting a ride from a family member or friend, followed by walking and wheelchair trips. We see that people with disabilities rely on a lot of different modes, so personal choice, personal vehicle was just barely their top choice, so it's a lot more balanced. And some of the trips people are making were errands, going to medical appointments, and social trips as well. Respondents were asked how many times in the last month they traveled using a specific mode, so the frequency of that mode, and this graph shows responses for older adults only. And we see that in the purple, a mode was used 6 or more times, and in the orange, it was used up to 5 times. So personal vehicle is still a top choice for older adults, along with walking, using a wheelchair, and using a bicycle. When we look at how people with disabilities responded, personal vehicle is still the top mode, but we see an increase in the other categories. So the number of trips made by public transit, paratransit, taxis, and modes in the other category. And other modes that were listed were rides received through medical and insurance providers, trips on the Amtrak, coaster, and micromobility, such as circuit was also mentioned in the other category. The survey included a section that asked respondents about their unmet transportation needs. Respondents were asked how often they are not able to go somewhere due to a lack of available transportation. And people with disabilities are more likely to miss trips several times a week, as we can tell from the top bar, or very often compared to older adults. When we look at the purpose of the missed trips, we see that errands are at the top, followed by social or recreational trips and medical appointments from both groups. But overall, we see people with disabilities are more likely to miss those types of trips and specifically miss medical appointments. So that's the third bar. Respondents were also asked what challenges they experience when using and considering transportation options in San Diego County. Almost half of the respondents identified a lack of transit to their desired location, so like where they were trying to go. Other common challenges including safety concerns, difficulty getting to and from a bus stop or station, and a lack of transportation available when they needed it. People with disabilities are more likely to experience all of these challenges compared to older adults. And if we see the none of the above option, it's a lot more older adults saying they have no challenges. Respondents who missed trips were asked what would help them complete their necessary or desired trips, and over half of the respondents selected more routes and transportation services. Other commonly selected solutions included more frequent transportation service, door-to-door options, and transportation options during late night and or the weekends. So I'd just like to note that door-to-door, that service is a specialized transportation service where areas, most of all these other top solutions could be fixed by providing more increased service levels on fixed route transit. And overall, people with disabilities rated these solutions higher than older adults. And those responses were also consistent with what we heard in the focus groups that we hosted as well. Respondents were also asked about their level of comfort using technologies to help with trip planning and making trips. And a significant portion of respondents are very comfortable using technology for trip planning. This is also consistent with what we heard in the focus groups. Respondents were also asked where they gather information about transportation options. The most common source was online searches or websites, followed by word of mouth, printed materials or flyers. Not many respondents in our survey received referrals from FACT, and so if we just look at the top bar, people get their information online. If we look at the lowest bar, we see that they're not getting referrals from other sources as well. We asked people with disabilities about the specialized transportation sources that they were aware of. And while we see that some were aware of MTS Access, NCTD Lift, Jewish Family Services. We also see the bottom bar, which is none of the above. So information sources are not currently resulting in great awareness for specialized transportation services. And now I'll turn it back over to Tim to summarize our key takeaways.
Thank you. And so obviously we have lots of charts here, so it's kind of a lot of information. But that's the point of doing the survey. We have a lot more questions as well that we asked. And so we're making sure to take a good look at all of those responses in order to kind of have some of the takeaways and things that we want to have as recommendations out of the plan. But some of the main things we heard is that, perhaps not surprisingly, driving is still a really common way for a lot of these folks of getting around. But especially among people with disabilities, there's like a lot of different modes that they're using, depending on the type of trip that they're going on and what options they have available to them. Not everybody has the ability or the means to be driving all over the place. And public transportation, public transit was really a common way. There's something like 20% of our respondents had used public transit in the last month, and many of those folks had been using it pretty often. So among our survey population, fixed route transit is a good way of getting around. It's relatively affordable. It's frequent. You don't need to be planning ahead as much. Some of the specialized transportation options, you have to book a day or multiple days in advance, and you have a kind of a set time, which is, it's a really great service, but it's not the most convenient. It's not show up and ride. Whereas fixed route transit really does offer that that opportunity for all folks, but including people with disabilities and older adults. So we heard desire for more transit service, more transit coverage. And specialized transportation, as Ruby mentioned, is really helpful, but a lot of people actually aren't aware of it, even if they are eligible and could benefit from it. So along with providing more information, providing more of that service in particular areas to help fill gaps where public transit is not available or not as effective is important for filling gaps. And then once again, people are they're pretty comfortable for the most part using technology and finding information themselves about how to plan their trips. As long as we give them good information. So if we have good websites, if we have good information out there, then a lot of people can help themselves. And as a backup option, trip planning services and kind of more one-on-one personalized service to help people find their options is could be useful. So that's some of the highlights from the survey. We heard similar things in the focus group, and we heard more detail on many of these questions. There's also other components of the plan that we'll be incorporating, such as performance measurement. So that's looking at how well transit, paratransit, other types of transportation are serving our community. So how much does it cost per trip? How many trips are they serving per hour? Basically, how well are they functioning? And we have good benchmarks on that and historical data to be able to assess that. We're also going to be looking at how well the Consolidated Transportation Services Agency is meeting our needs. And so some of those needs, it's not necessarily that they're, ultimately we want the CTSA to help coordinate the transportation services that are available, and we want people, residents of the region, to be able to access all of these modes. And so how well is the CTSA program working as a whole, and is it meeting the needs of our riders? And then in addition to that, we'll also be looking at how well the Specialized Transportation Grant Program is meeting some of these needs as well. We'll be doing a little bit more deep dive into the unmet needs and what it would cost if we had access to more money. How many more of those trips could we meet? And then ultimately, that'll help us identify what we want to have as priority funding recommendations. I have here draft plan release anticipated April 2025. It'll be a little bit delayed as we kind of have more conversations. We don't want to rush this. We want to make sure that we're hearing all the feedback from our working groups and our transportation committee. So probably more like May or June will be when that is available. We'll be sure to let the social equity working group know when that's happening, and anticipate having it available for the public for about a month before we ask our transportation committee to approve it. With that, we invite members of the public to ask questions, discuss these results. This is our interpretation, but if there's other ways of looking at the data, we'd love to hear that. But yeah, thank you for your time. We'll turn it back to the chair to facilitate questions and discussion.
Microphone?
Thank you so much, Tim and Ruby. Really enjoyed the presentation and thank you for taking a scientific approach to this and really collecting the important data that we need to make good, intelligent decisions on this. Do we have any comments from the public?
We have no public comment, Chair.
Okay, and do we have any questions or comments from members of the working group? Gomez?
Yeah, might have quite a bit of questions. First question is, and I think you got it, you got to it a little bit. You spoke a little bit on in the summary, but what is the intention of this survey? How would it be utilized to influence what?
Sure. So there's multiple reasons why we did it. We've been doing more convenient sample questionnaires and surveys in the past with our coordinated plan. So it's a lot of times it's folks who know about SANDAG, they're aware of our specialized transportation programs, and so it's kind of a smaller audience. We wanted to take a scientific approach where we're reaching folks from all across the regions. The way we did that was an address-based sample. So looking at census block groups all across the region, where are the higher concentrations of older adults and people with disabilities, folks who don't necessarily know about these services already. So it helps us identify what their needs are, regardless of if they know about the offerings that are available.
Okay.
That just helps better illustrate like the unmet need out there and what if we had more resources to be able to serve those trips, what would that look like and what would it require? And it also, we wanted to evaluate the effectiveness of our existing services. So how well are the dollars that we provide through our transit and through our specialized transportation, how well are those programs meeting those transportation needs? I think there was the main ones.
Okay. And then I have two other questions. The other one is, I think you once again in your answer right now, you implied, because I was wondering if there was a geographical location of the participants, just to get a sense of what was coming from where. Because I think not all communities are the same. Some have better access to transit. So perhaps that's where the comments about utilizing transit. It makes sense. So I'm just wondering if that could be included as well, just to get a sense of where this information, or if there's a trend that we're seeing somewhere that could be useful, right? For many reasons. So I think that would be a piece of information that I would add to this.
Okay.
The other one was in regards to the transportation services. I heard that people are not aware of. So there could be, and that's already services that are available. So that could be like low-hanging fruit in terms of perhaps coordinating with the transit agencies and finding a little bit of money to do some sort of PR campaign. Could be, and I see that as a low-hanging fruit, just because it is a system that is out there. But if people aren't aware of it, then they're not utilizing it, right? So just food for thought.
Thank you.
Yes, Carol Lewis.
Thank you for the presentation. You talked about focus groups, and I was wondering how many focus groups you held, how were people recruited for the focus groups, and where were they located?
Yeah. So we had 3 focus groups, one with specialized transportation providers, and that one was held here at SANDAG. We also had 2 focus groups with writers. And from the survey, one of the questions that was asked was, are you interested in being part of a focus group? And so over 500 people who took the survey were interested in a focus group. So we had 2 of those. We had around 13 participants. And we try to select people from different areas of San Diego and try to make that really representative as well. And those were held online.
Any other questions? Yes, Milan.
Thank you. I love these charts. They're so fun. Thank you. I have some questions just about to make sure I can read them correctly. So if an adult fell into both categories, 65 and older and disability, were their responses put twice on the chart or just into one category?
Yeah, they would be included on both bars.
Okay, thank you. And then Why is 65 the age that we're looking at?
Sure. So age 65 is, that comes from the federal definition of older adults, and that's
Gotcha.
related to the Section 5310 funding. So it's FTA funding. They provide it to SANDAG and other agencies across the country to specifically to provide transportation services for that eligibility. I know that we have for our senior, so Specialized Transportation Grant Program has two funding sources. One of them is that Section 5310 federal funding source. We also have Senior Mini Grant, which is coming from Transnet, which is our local sales tax. So, and that definition is actually 60 plus. So depending on when we do this, the call for projects through that grant program, some of the services where there's age 60 plus cutoff, they'll get senior mini grant funding. And if it's 65 plus, then they'll get the Section 5310.
Gotcha.
5310. But we just wanted to, while there are certainly people age 60 and above who have special transportation challenges, we just wanted to stick with the federal definition, just so we thought that would be a good place to draw the line for this for the survey.
That makes sense. And I think it's reasonable to think that anything, that age group that might not be covered, they would share similar challenges.
Right.
Okay, and then my last comment is that I think it's great that the second most popular information source is word of mouth, because it doesn't cost money, right? So I don't know how we could further incentivize that in the practices that we're doing, share this with your friends, give them a hand, I don't know, encourage them to continue and, what is it like? Telling them well done for sharing this with your friends, because that's how the information is getting out there and it's very cost effective. Thank you.
Bailey, you make me think about the opportunity to share more information with you all about specialized transportation services, so you can help us get the word out to your communities like you do about so many other SANDAG programs. So perhaps that's one of the recommendations that comes out of the coordinated plan, is to really leverage this network to help get the word out.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right, any further questions or comments? All right, thank you so much. We appreciate you being here.
Thank you. And our coordinated plan at sandag.org is our email address if you'd like to follow up with any questions. Thank you.
All right, thanks so much. All right, we'll move on to our next item, which is item number 4. It's the draft fiscal year 2026 SANDAG program budget. The staff will provide an overview of the draft fiscal year 2026 program budget. And today we will have Tyler Woods and Antoinette Meyer from the SANDAG presenting. Thank you, Tyler, for being here. Good to see you, Antoinette.
I only have one slide. I'll keep it.
Okay, excellent. All right, we'll start with you, Tyler. No.
Green light.
There. Okay, thank you. Good morning. Thank you for having me here. I'm Tyler Woods, the budget manager here at SANDAG, and it's a pleasure to be presenting the draft program budget to you all today. Over the last several months, SANDAG staff and leadership have been working diligently to develop this draft budget, which has been carefully assembled to align with state and federal funding guidelines, ensuring compliance while advancing critical transportation projects and programs in the region. Before we jump into the works of the budget, just want to provide a little context on our mandates here at SANDAG. So we approach the annual budget by first focusing on the projects and programs required by our many mandates and responsibilities, some of which you can see on this slide. For example, we're the region's metropolitan planning organization and the Fed's eyes, as well as the Regional Transportation Planning Agency and Council of Governments and the state's eyes. So each of these designations not only gives SANDAG access to critical funding streams, but also comes with very specific obligations and requirements that guide our work and how those funds are programmed and spent. And it's important to note that while we have a lot of designations that you can see up here, we're primarily an agency that coordinates cross-jurisdictional planning and infrastructure. However, counties and local jurisdictions are primarily responsible for planning, infrastructure, and maintenance within their borders. And then to provide even a little bit more context before we dive into the budget. So how do projects get into SANDAG's budget? So unlike many cities in the county of San Diego, SANDAG budgets by project rather than by department. In order for a project to be included in SANDAG's annual budget, it must first be a part of the regional plan or long-term planning document for the region that's updated every 4 years. Then the board and agency leadership identify which projects to prioritize, and then SANDAG staff identify or pursue funding to complete those projects. And from there, it's put into our annual program budget for approval by the board. Finally, those projects that are approved in the budget move into the Regional Transportation Improvement Program, or RTIP, our 5-year near-term investment plan that's required for SANDAG to draw down federal, state, and Transnet funds. All of these plans I just described are provided to the board for their approval and review. So now moving into the budget overview, just a quick note that our annual budget is revenue constrained, so all costs that we put into the budget must have revenue on them to proceed. And so with that note, back in February, the Board of Directors received a detailed economic and budget outlook, which included a downward revised estimate for some of our local dollars, Transnet, and Transportation Development Act funding. Additionally, as Mario mentioned in his comments to this work group back in February, we're continuing to closely monitor potential impacts from recent federal executive orders and policy changes, particularly as they relate to transportation funding streams. So as you can see here, this is the entirety of SANDAG's annual FY26 budget. It's $1.3 billion, half of which you can see is for the capital program. And then those pinkish slices down in the lower left are our local Transnet dollars. And those are allocated for major corridor projects, as well as pass through to local jurisdictions and agencies. Now, the flip side of that pie chart is the revenue that goes to fund those costs. So our 3 primary components of the budget are capital, as you saw earlier, our overall work plan, as well as regional operations. And as you can see, about 3/4 of the revenue is used to support, 3/4 of the revenue is from federal and state sources. And then Transnet is about 15% of the revenue we use for our projects. And then the other local funds slice you see up there, the 11% is our local TDA dollars, member assessments, as well as toll road revenue. And now I'm going to pass it over to Antoinette for the overall program.
Thank you, Tyler. Good morning, Antoinette Meyer, Planning Director here at SANDAG. And I have the primary responsibility of the overall work program and the budget because that is the non-capital projects. That's planning projects, that's programs and services that are not yet through the environmental process and ready to be constructed. So there are, you can flip to the next one for me, Tyler. Thank you. So there are 55 different work elements in the overall work program. And it's not just planning projects, but our data science team. So all of the research, like the survey that you just heard about, is covered under there. It's outreach and engagement. The contracts that we have with all of you is covered in the OWP. And then it's financial management and our grant programs. We give out a lot of money at SANDAG. We either pass through funding from state and federal sources or through the Transnet program. And this year in particular, we're giving out a lot of grants. So we received a lot of money from the state through the Housing Acceleration Program. I know Georgette at Casa Familiar is one of the recipients of some of that grant funding. And a lot of that money we're not keeping for SANDAG's purposes. We're giving it to the agencies and organizations that are actually responsible for building housing. Another example of funding that we give away or pass through is the Youth Opportunity Pass program. So that's money that goes through to the transit agencies to cover the costs of the Youth Opportunity Passes. But I just want to remind this group that this is the last year that we have funding. The current funding source that we have for YOP is only covers pilots, and we've extended that as far as we can, 3 years as a pilot project. So we're actively seeking eligible funding to continue that program into the future. You'll see that there's a variety of funding sources, federal, state, local funds that make up the OWP. But what we really focus on, and Tyler mentioned this, is making sure that we're doing the mandated work so we can keep that funding coming into the region. So first and foremost is the regional plan. Have to have a regional plan in order to get federal and state funding. It's something that we're always working on. You've been a big part of helping us with the 2025 regional plan that we'll be adopting this year. And then the other mandate is to implement the early actions in the regional plan, right? So the things that we committed to in the regional plan. So you'll see in the OWP, there's a lot of transit projects that we're planning. And those were commitments that we made in the 2021 regional plans. We've got 6 rapid projects. We're studying different rail improvements across the region. Airport transit connection is in there, and a number of other programs. Flexible fleets, that's a new grant program that's in the OWP. Flexible fleets are the microtransit, neighborhood shuttle services. We've funded some in partnership with some of your organizations and agencies, and we're about to do a call for projects so that local jurisdictions and entities across the region can implement more of those flexible fleet pilot projects. So that's kind of a general overview of the OWP, and I'll pass it back to Tyler to talk about the capital and the operations part of the budget.
Thanks, Antoinette. And so now moving into the other part of the pie chart, the regional operations and services. So this component of the budget provides management of ongoing operational programs and customer services that deliver mobility and public safety services. It provides for maintenance and support of intelligent transportation and regional law enforcement data systems that support travelers and public safety agencies in our region. Examples of this work include management of SR 125, Freeway Service Patrol, and the SANDAG Van Pool Program. The change year over year from FY25 to FY26 is about 6.1 million in increases, and that's primarily attributable to the back office solutions for toll operations moving out of the capital budget into the regional operations budget. Moving to the capital program part of the pie chart. So this is our capital project budget. It's the largest component, as you saw earlier, and it's a direct result of state legislation that made SANDAG the responsible agency for construction of major transit facilities. This component of the budget includes multi-year Transnet major corridor, regional bikeway program, and other transit and capital improvements, including things like Losan rail realignment, North Coast Corridor Program, bike infrastructure, and Otay Mesa East. So the capital budget for FY26 is relatively unchanged to FY25. However, the multi-year capital budget is about $9.2 billion, and that is an increase of about 255 million, which is spread out across a number of different projects. I won't go into detail here, but you can see it in our draft budget links in those reports, and it will show you specifically which projects moved up. So just to cap things off, as far as where the budget is traveling to next, the draft budget's going to be presented to the board tomorrow for their approval, at which point we will be seeking their input as well as stakeholders, leading up to us proposing a final budget in May, which will then immediately be sent to our funding agencies so that we can begin spending dollars beginning with the fiscal year on July 1st. And with that, that concludes my presentation.
And while the budget book itself is very lengthy and maybe a little bit difficult to follow, I do want to point out that on our website, SANDAG website, there's an interactive map. So at least for the capital projects, the things that you can put a line or a dot on a map for, you can click on it and get information about what it is in the budget. A little bit easier tool to use.
Thank you so much, Mr. Woods. And we will now ask the clerk if we have any public comment.
We have no public comment, Chair.
Okay. And any comments or questions from the working group? Yes, Claire.
How,
Barry.
I think, are you there?
Closer.
Can you hear me? Can you hear
Yes,
me?
there you go.
Just curious as to the latest federal reductions that's been experienced and we've been experiencing and probably will. I noticed that none of this was affected by it.
Well, we don't know yet. So there are things that are affected. There are funding programs that are held up, and
Right.
we don't know yet what the result is going to be. So we're tracking it very closely on an ongoing basis, and we'll make adjustments to the budget as needed. But as of now, the budget's based on what we know today.
Okay. Thank you.
Claire?
Thank you. I had a similar question around just about, yeah, federal impacts. And so you answered that. Thank you. But I guess just curious, like what SANDAG or local jurisdictions, the state, our organizations can do to advocate for if there's any specific calls to action so that we can, try to get ahead of it.
We'll keep you all kind of apprised of any opportunities to, support and advocate. Off the top of my head, I don't know of existing opportunities. Certainly the state budgets process is underway right now, and there's always an opportunity to, influence that. You saw a large part of our funding actually does come from the state and not just the federal government. So that's an ongoing opportunity for you all to make sure that, state leaders are aware of what the priorities are for this region. But we'll keep you in the loop as we learn more. Things are happening really quickly, and it's been, kind of challenging to sort of track the impacts. But what we understand right now is that the formula funding, the funding that we don't have to compete for, is pretty stable, and we shouldn't expect any changes there. It's the discretionary grants where we're anticipating, probably the biggest challenges and the most changes. And I know maybe Tyler and Susan have any additional information to add there. They're keeping track of it all day, every day.
Sure, I was gonna say, I mean, I think we're just embellishing on what Antoinette mentioned. It's just kind of a keeping our ears to the ground kind of activity. And we do have a government relations team that's very much active in making sure they're listening to every word and writing that comes out of the federal government.
I'll just add to that for just a quick moment. I'm Susan Huntington. I'm the Director of Financial Planning, Budgets and Grants here at SANDAG. We are watching 7 grants where we won a competitive award that we don't have an executed funding agreement with the federal government. And those are the ones that are most uncertain at this point. It adds up to about $272 million for the region. What we're doing in the financial planning group is developing contingency plans. So if we're ready for that project to start, what other funding could be swapped in? Can we advance something else while the federal government is still working on executing that agreement? We are absolutely following and tracking. Just to let you know, the largest of those grants was $150 million for the Otay Mesa East Port of Entry. And that team is working with the federal government. We're getting comments back. So we are having correspondence, and so we consider that a positive. And so we're just kind of working through it on the one side with the federal government, but at the same time, we're developing contingency plans and seeing if we may have other funding sources so we can keep those projects moving.
And one thing I would suggest, I was just speaking with Congresswoman Jacobs, and she said that they are unaware. They used to get notices when a funding would be cut, and they're no longer getting those notices. And so if there are projects like these 7 projects, if you can provide us a list, and then we are able to reach out and our different capacities to have our clients and us tell the stories of how these would impact our communities, that would be really helpful, I think, to getting the message out, because we don't know what's getting cut. Our Congress people don't know what's getting cut. And particularly those, I see El Cajon over here, who might be in Congressman Ice's department. That might be really helpful to get them the information. All right, we'll go to Georgette Gomez.
Yeah, I had a similar question about the federal and so if I understand this correctly, you said over 300,000 or so is grant money.
The $272 million.
Oh, okay. Okay. So that's 200 out of right. Okay. So and I don't know if that is described in the full report. But maybe it might be useful just because it is something that it should have a special conversation. And I say that because we were a grantee of a couple of federal EPA dollars. We just received one of them, got terminated on Friday. So, and we are in a very unique, we love this region. We are by the border. So there's just a huge narrative happening in our region right now at the federal. So it's just something to think about. Just trying to figure out, let's not wait, let's figure out how we arm the community, the electeds sooner than later, because I think it's coming. The other question that I had was for Transnet, can you remind me, when is that expected to terminate?
The program that we're under right now was 2008. It was 40 years, so 2048.
2048, okay. And then for the capital projects, I know that you mentioned that there is a interactive map on the website. Is there like a list of all the projects in the report? Yeah. Okay. Just was curious. Thank you.
Yeah, in
Yes,
the budget book.
And
Okay.
at the beginning of chapter 5 in the budget, and there's a link in your agenda report today. Chapter 5 is our capital budget. One of the first pages in there is an index. So you can kind of go through and read all of the projects. There are 112 capital projects. 80 of them are in support of the Transnet Major Corridor Program set of projects. So it will lay out all of those projects for you.
Okay. And is it laid out in the way that it's got what's funding it or?
Absolutely. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Great. Thank you.
Any questions or comments on this side? Oh, Millen Hernandez.
Thank you. Thank you. So there's a lot of important things going on here, and I don't want to sound like a broken record, but I got to talk about Youth Opportunity Pass. So if we're being honest, we're concerned because there's 1 year of funding left on this program. And we've seen ridership triple from 13,000 to 46,000. We know the youth are riding. We know it's a good program. And I'm always, I always want to say thank you to SANDAG because you took a chance on this pilot when a lot of people were like, well, I don't know if it's a good idea, right? So I really want to uplift that. However, we need more time because if we are going to wait for new grants to come in or a measure to pass, a year is just a very short time for that. And so our ask, I know it's a big ask because funding sources are restricted, many of them are restricted, but can SANDAG do everything that's within its ability to extend the pilot? And I know a 5-year pilot might be like, it's a 5-year pilot, but it's better than no pilot, right? So I don't know what's within our power as a social equity working group, but could we recommend that to the board or to the staff, like as a group, looking into it and extending the pilot?
So Baleen, it's not SANDAG's rules. It's the funding source that we're using, which is a federal funding source. And we actually already did extend it. And so there's not really action that the board can take or this group can take. It's federal funding guidelines that only allow for this money to be used for pilot purposes. And so we're getting as creative as we possibly can, and we're, constantly looking for other funding sources, but we don't have, maybe it came through in the presentation today, but if it didn't, we don't have a lot of discretionary funding. Most of our funding is dedicated, right? And so it's a matter of trying to find a new source of funding because the existing sources that we have available to us today are not eligible to pay for the YOP.
And I will add to that I know our government relations team has been looking for a legislative solution as well at the state level. So we're trying to come up with creative solutions to keep the program going. We understand how important it is. So we know that this is a priority within the region.
Yeah, when it comes to YOP, what would it take for it to because I know we've been talking about it, extending it, but what would it take for it to become like a permanent program that lives within SANDAG? I know SANDAG operates like various different programs like bike incentives, and they're like on a yearly basis. So I think ideally long term, that's something that we would want to see, right? Moving away from the pilot. It's been a pilot. We know the data's out there. The data proves that it's successful. Like, what would it take for it to just be permanent and live within SANDAG?
It would take an eligible funding source, and it wouldn't live within SANDAG because we're not the operators. So
Okay.
it has to live within MTS and NCTD ultimately.
Okay. That makes it complicated because we only have a year left. Yeah. Well, thank you.
Can I just
Yes.
in this conversation, I know that the state, and I don't know if, to what extent it made reference to transit, but I know the state is getting ready to define the use of the Prop 6 money, which is climate money. So right now, the state is actively taking in input in how to utilize some of that money that was an earmark, or even the one that was earmarked. It's all related to climate, so this is a perfect narrative to really try to influence that. If there is a package that SANDAG has created related to demonstrating the success of this program, that might be an opportunity, and that conversation is happening as we speak.
Barry.
The microtransit program is a pilot program, correct? Okay, so after that pilot program's over, is there any projection of what cost would be passed down to the folks that use it? I mean, that is the plan.
Well, we'll be learning a lot about that through the pilot, right? The cost to operate the services. And so that's the intent of the pilot, is really to kind of learn, and then we know, what kind of funding resources we need to have a program like that moving forward. But again, these would not be, SANDAG's not an operator. So we're seeding it, providing some, startup funding for these services, but they'll ultimately need to be adopted by agencies that do operations.
So has this been done before anywhere in California with any other transit agency?
There have been some micropilots, and we're going to have a workshop, a joint working group workshop, and bring some of those different groups from around the state and country on a panel so that you all and our other working groups can ask questions about how they're funded, what works well, what doesn't work so well, and apply that best practices locally.
So do you have any projections of what this could potentially cost?
I don't. I think we're going to be learning that from the pilot. Right now, this pilot program was $5 million. I believe that the grant program has a max award per vendor of $1 million per the draft criteria. But ongoing sustainable funding source, what it would take? No, I don't know that.
We're hearing it varies, but we're hearing, it's about $40 to $80 per passenger to operate microtransit service. It's
$80
per passenger. So it's a very expensive service to operate because of the demand responsive nature of it, right?
Georgia?
So,
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
so has those other entities, agencies, as they transitioned away from a pilot program, what has generally, nobody will hold it to you, but what's generally been the increase? General, percentage-wise?
Don't know. We don't have that information, but I encourage you to participate in the workshop and talk to folks that have the experience.
Georgia?
Yeah, so just in this micro mobility conversation, I know that we're gonna have a pilot not funded by SANDAG, funded by Strategic Growth Council, and one of the projects that we're building. And while I was putting that proposal together, one thing that was a really aha moment and very frustrating as well, which then it got me thinking on this other project that I'll share a little bit about, but the high cost is the operator that one is hiring to like run this system. They're not cheap. They cost quite a bit. And so one thing that we put together is trying to arm the organization to learn how to operate the system itself by hiring community folks and then eventually transforming that into a worker cooperative system, but is being run by community folks, right? But they've gone through the whole process. The difference in cost was significantly different, right? And I saw that as a benefit because A, we're keeping the dollars in the community, we're hiring people from the community. And I just think we got it, like in this micromobility world that we're kind of like pushing, a lot of it is being done in a way that you're hiring a company to come in to run it, and that's where the money's getting sucked. So I'm just saying that just because it is something to consider and be a little bit more creative because it can be approached differently.
That's the hope with the pilots is that we see different models, different operational models, and we can learn, what works best, what's the most affordable. We have different models right now. So NCTD is operating their own microtransit service in North County. We have the little circuit neighborhood electric vehicle shuttles that, are being operated in different neighborhoods, and there's different funding models. Sometimes those are being paid for through parking revenues. And sometimes they're being paid for through, other sources of funding. But we'll be learning a lot over the next several years. And I'm hoping that you're sharing best practices with your model that you're exploring, because that sounds really interesting, like it'd be a good option for some of our communities.
Yeah, and I was piggybacking with what Georgette, I think, was speaking about is it would be really nice if there could be a training program for community members when VIA picks over and they start the warm handoff. Are they going to come here and talk to us? Do you know? Is that scheduled?
You're asking if we can get VIA to come talk to you all? I'm sure we could.
That might be a good question for them because initially I can see their need, but if we think in terms of turning this over to community, there's perhaps getting some sort of a training program going to shadow them just for community members that we identify, just the concept to try to get it back into the community driven sort of model. That'd be possible.
We can certainly talk to VIA. I don't know that they're really in the business of training and
I know,
turning over.
I know.
So.
No, I know. That's why.
I can't
That's why
commit
I'm
them to
very
anything.
tenuous. I'm very tenuous about bringing that up, but that would probably be the community choice if we were given that opportunity, I would think. And they can meet us halfway, and I think they are because they are looking at hiring locally, so.
Look out for that meeting date. I believe it's early May, and it'll be another one of the joint where we invite all the working groups to come and hear it.
Any other questions or comments? Just briefly, some of the, for example, the Losan project, we're spending a lot of money studying different plans and different concepts on where to move those rails. I think an equity analysis, because a lot of those moves will take options for access to the beach away from people who live west of or east of the 5. And it's making it very difficult for people from those communities to be able to get there, especially since we're reducing parking along those areas as well. And so at least that in those studies that we're talking about and analyzing how people east of the 5 are going to be able to access the beaches and make sure that we continue to not exclude people who can't afford to live along the 5 or like west of the 5. That they can also enjoy the beaches as well, and figuring out like paths for increasing that, and really striving to include the far East County regions. I know we have one person who's representing El Cajon, but there's a real dearth of transportation options for people who live. Even in our city, I spoke with FACT, and of the 14,000 rides that they had provided, only less than 1% were coming from my area. And so we really want to make sure that these communities know about the services that are being provided. NCTD is up in North County, but again, the East County region really doesn't have a lot of stuff going on as far, or the people don't know about it. And so we really need to start pushing our focus out on how we're going to help facilitate transit from the East County region. I mean, all of us know that the rents are super high and people are being pushed further and further and further east to be able just to find affordable housing. And if we don't have a clear plan on how we're going to get those people to where jobs and resources are, and the jobs and resources are still located on the west side of San Diego County. And so I think that if we can really make sure that we're putting a focus on that, and the budget is where we really decide to make equity happen. And so I think that that's one of the things that, like, as a working group, we can really push to have happen here.
I'll just chime in, Chair. This group was instrumental in bringing back coastal access as a performance measure in the regional plan for the 2025 regional plan. So I feel like lots of folks hear you and feel the same.
Yes.
Just
Georgia?
going back to a previous conversation that I'm not sure what are like the next steps and if this group is going to be incorporated. But on the YOP, I know that you're looking at resources and that's great. But maybe there's a subgroup or a working group that is really, really interested in being a partner to really facilitate finding and doing the work to get that money might be beneficial, versus, outside is agitating, y'all are looking, but there's like, it just feels like it's going into the ethers. So I don't know if that can come from this or a better coordinated effort, right? Being that you are looking and there seems to be interest in wanting that to become a permanent situation. So it just feels like it's, I don't know.
Yeah, and I definitely think that as we get more statistics and data and metrics, performance, impact of our pilot program, I think that's going to be the piece that helps us justify the continuation and the visibility that this group and others can provide in helping to sell that story. I think that's really important. So appreciate the comment, and we would definitely look forward to working with this group.
Okay.
I think Georgette's suggestion is on point. And we have the impact study, which it was survey data and it was focus group data, and MTS and CTD could provide like up-to-date ridership. So I don't think that accessing the reports is like a hurdle here. I think it's that coordinated action. And so when the pilot was established, we had a working group led by Brian and Zach. And so that group has ceased to meet. I don't know if we could bring back that working group to think about, what is not attainable, but what is attainable.
I can check back in with Brian. And then I will just mention, which I know you know this, but the 10 transit lifelines, that transportation equity working group is also still meeting. So that's another potential avenue that's not necessarily SANDAG, but we're talking with that group, and I know there's quite a bit of overlap as well.
Thank you.
All right.
My action item for this is to follow up with Brian about that now defunct working group, and then potentially, I think on your end, have it come to the transportation equity working group as well.
And also just maybe extend the coordinated effort to the school districts and see if they're willing to work with it. I had 2 kids who were kinship care, and they were able to get public transit passes through because they were eligible for free and student lunch. But it was really helpful. And so some of these programs are there, so maybe we could coordinate those efforts, and maybe it wouldn't be as expensive if they're already getting free passes through another program.
and stuff.
So I got just a
Yes, Barry.
question. Where's the MTS in all this? Where do they stand? Does anyone know? They're the ones that provide the mass trend. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, they support the program, but they also need to fund the program. I
Right.
think they have a huge budget deficit as well. And their, primary goal right now is to not have to cut back on service.
Right.
And to find funding to continue operations at existing levels. And they also, our regional plan shows them actually increasing operations and frequencies, right? So they love the YOP program. They see the successes of the YOP program, but like us, they have to find a source of funding to be able to sustain it and not impact service levels.
And we used to have somebody from MTS and somebody from NCTD on that working group. So I think that's what made that space effective too, because there's that cross-agency coordination.
All right, any other comments? Thank you so much. So we have no other items on the agenda. Our next meeting will take place on Thursday, April 24th, 2025. And as mentioned earlier, this will take place at our new SANDAG office at the West Building. Staff will follow up with more details. And if those are all the comments, thank you for coming today. And we are adjourning this meeting at 10:39 a.m. Thank you.